Winter in northern England today can feel harsh, uncomfortable, even difficult to endure at times.
We complain about the cold, about the grey skies that seem to stretch endlessly, about the early darkness that comes in late afternoon. But despite our complaints, modern winter is fundamentally manageable in ways our ancestors could never have imagined. We have heated homes where the temperature is controlled by thermostats, maintaining comfortable warmth regardless of the conditions outside. We have insulated clothing made from advanced synthetic materials specifically engineered to trap heat and repel moisture. We have food that arrives at our tables regardless of weather. Trucks navigate icy roads, supply chains remain operational, grocery stores stay stocked even during the worst winter storms. In 1650, winter was something else entirely. It was not an inconvenience to be managed with technology. It was a life-threatening season that tested every aspect of human survival, revealing which families had prepared adequately and which had not. In this video, I'm using modern artificial intelligence tools to bring historical images, documents, and records to life with careful attention to accuracy. But my goal isn't to dramatize the cold or exaggerate the hardships for emotional effect. Instead, I want to step with you into an ordinary winter day, completely normal for the people experiencing it, and understand how they actually lived through it, hour by hour, task by task. This is northern England in the mid-17th century, a landscape that would be recognizable to modern eyes, but experienced in profoundly different ways. The days are brutally short during winter months. The sun rises late and sets early, sometimes providing only 7 or 8 hours of weak daylight. The nights stretch long and dark, filled with cold that penetrates every structure, every layer of clothing, every attempt at warmth. Light itself is precious during these winter months, not just sunlight, which appears so briefly, but any light at all. Candles are expensive, made from tallow or beeswax, and must be rationed carefully. Rushlights, cheaper alternatives made from reeds dipped in fat, provide dim illumination that barely pushes back the darkness. Most activities must be planned around available light, because working in darkness is difficult, dangerous and wasteful of precious fuel for illumination. Winter doesn't pause life or provide any respite from the constant demands of survival. Instead, it presses against life relentlessly, making every task harder, every journey more dangerous, every day more uncertain. Morning begins in near darkness, with only the faintest grey light filtering through cracks and gaps in the walls. The sun won't rise for another hour or more, but work cannot wait for daylight. There's simply too much that must be done. The house is completely unheated overnight. No one keeps a fire burning through the dark hours, because the cost in fuel would be impossible to sustain over months of winter. Wood and peat must be gathered, eat laboriously during other seasons, dried, stored and rationed with extreme care. Burning fuel all night would exhaust supplies long before spring arrives. Frost clings to the inside of windows, if there are proper windows at all. Many homes in this era and region have only shuttered openings, wooden covers that seal against wind but offer no transparent barrier and no insulation value. Ice crystals form on interior walls where moisture from breath and cooking has condensed and frozen. The air inside feels almost as cold as the air outside. People wake already cold, their bodies stiff and aching from hours lying on thin straw mattresses that provide minimal insulation from the frozen ground or floor beneath. Sleep itself was probably fitful and unsatisfying, interrupted repeatedly by the cold, by the sounds of wind pressing against the structure, by the shifting of other family members, trying desperately to find warmth or some comfortable position. The first task, before anything else, can happen before anyone can eat or dress or begin the day's work, is fire. Someone, usually the woman of the house, sometimes a child old enough to be trusted with this critical responsibility, must rebuild it carefully from the embers that were banked the previous night, covered with ash to preserve them through the dark hours. If the embers have died completely, starting a new fire becomes significantly harder and more time-consuming, requiring flint and steel struck together repeatedly to create sparks and dry tinder that must be kept protected from moisture in a special container. This process can take many minutes of frustrating effort, and failure means a cold house for even longer. Fuel is rationed with extreme care and mathematical precision. Every piece of wood, every handful of dried peat, every bundle of dried brush represents labour, hours spent gathering, cutting, carrying and drying during warmer months. Burning too much now means having less. Later, perhaps running out entirely before winter ends. Every spark matters. Every flame is precious and must be protected from drafts. Layers of clothing are added slowly, piece by piece, as the fire begins to provide minimal warmth to the immediate area around the hearth. Wool is the primary fabric for warmth. Thick, scratchy wool that has been spun, woven, and sewn by hand within the household, or purchased at considerable expense from local weavers. Wool retains warmth even when damp, a crucial property in the persistently wet climate of northern England. Leather provides additional protection, particularly for outer garments and footwear, though leather is expensive and must be maintained carefully to prevent it from becoming stiff and cracked. Clothing is repaired again and again, patched when torn, reinforced when worn thin, passed down from older family members to younger ones. Nothing is discarded lightly. A garment that cannot be worn anymore might be torn apart and the fabric reused for patches on other items, or cut into strips for other purposes. The concept of disposable clothing would be incomprehensible. Shoes, often more like rough leather boots, are stiff from accumulated damp that never fully dries out during winter months. They must be forced onto feet that are already cold. Hands ache before work even begins, fingers stiff and difficult to move with full dexterity. Winter is felt immediately and constantly, not as an abstract concept, but as a physical reality pressing against the body. There is no escaping it, no warming up fully, no moment of complete comfort. The best one can hope for is to reduce the cold to a bearable level. Outside, stepping beyond the minimal protection of the house, the landscape appears muted and subdued under winter's grip. Fields lie bare, stripped of crops, waiting for spring planting that is still months away. Trees stand skeletal against grey skies. Paths are either muddy, thick, clinging mud that makes every step exhausting, or frozen solid into uneven, treacherous surfaces that can turn an ankle or cause a dangerous fall. But work shifts rather than disappears during winter. The intensive agricultural labour of planting, tending and harvesting may be paused, but countless other tasks remain essential and cannot be postponed. Animals must still be fed every single day. Livestock, sheep, cattle, pigs, chickens, depend entirely on human care for survival during winter when natural forage is unavailable. Hay stored during summer must be distributed. Water must be provided, which means breaking ice on troughs or carrying water from wells that may be partially frozen. Tools require repair during winter months. Wooden handles crack and must be replaced. Metal blades need sharpening. Leather straps wear out and must be sewn or replaced. This maintenance work, done indoors when possible, ensures that tools will be ready when spring's intensive labour begins. Food stores must be protected constantly. Grain must be kept dry or it will spoil. Preserved meat and vegetables must be monitored for signs of rot. Rodents pose a constant threat and must be guarded against vigilantly. A significant loss of stored food during winter could mean starvation before new crops become available. Winter work is quieter than the bustling activity of harvest season, but it is no less necessary for survival. Every task skipped or done poorly creates problems that may become catastrophic as winter continues. Meals during winter are deliberately heavier and richer, designed specifically to sustain body warmth and provide energy for the physically demanding work that continues regardless of cold. Bread, dark, dense bread, made from rye or barley, sometimes mixed with other grains, forms the foundation of most meals. Stews made from root vegetables, dried peas or beans, and preserved meat, if the family can afford it, provide concentrated nutrition and warmth. The stew pot might sit over the fire for days, continuously, added to and eaten from, ensuring that food is always hot and ready.
Fresh food is rare to the point of being nearly non-existent. Fresh vegetables disappeared months ago.
Fresh meat comes only when an animal is slaughtered, which happens infrequently because living animals are valuable resources that will reproduce and provide milk, eggs, or wool. Most meat consumed during winter has been preserved through salting, smoking, or drying, processes that extend shelf life, but also alter taste and texture significantly. What was saved, preserved, and stored during autumn must last until spring brings new growth. This creates enormous pressure on food management. Every meal is a calculation. Eat enough to maintain strength and warmth, but not so much that supplies run out before winter ends. Mistakes made months earlier are felt acutely now. If harvest was poor, if preservation was done incorrectly, if quantities were miscalculated, if unexpected guests or events depleted stores, the consequences manifest as hunger during these darkest, coldest months. There is no grocery store to visit, no backup supply system. You eat what you stored or you don't eat. Cold itself weakens the human body, making it more susceptible to the numerous illnesses that circulate constantly through communities. Illness spreads easily in conditions where people crowd indoors seeking warmth, sharing close spaces with poor ventilation, breathing the same air for hours at a time. Respiratory infections pass from person to person with devastating efficiency. Coughs, fevers, and congestion are common enough to be expected, but they can escalate into something far more serious. Recovery from illness is deeply uncertain. There are no antibiotics, no understanding of germs or infection, no medical interventions that would be recognizable to modern people. Treatment consists of folk remedies, herbal preparations, poultices, bloodletting, that are sometimes helpful, sometimes neutral, sometimes actively harmful. Rest helps, but rest means not working, which creates additional problems for families operating at the edge of survival. Winter is the season that reveals, most starkly, who prepared well and who did not. Families with adequate food stores, sufficient fuel for heat, dry housing, and enough warm clothing tend to survive winter in better health. Those lacking these resources suffer disproportionately. Loss of children, of elderly family members, of neighbours is common enough during winter that it rarely surprises anyone. Death is an accepted part of winter's cycle, expected and mourned, but not shocking. Every community counts fewer people when spring arrives than it had when winter began. Night arrives early during winter, sometimes as early as mid-afternoon. The brief window of daylight closes, and darkness settles over the landscape for 15 or 16 hours. Firelight replaces daylight as the primary source of illumination. The fire that has burned all day is tended carefully, built up slightly as evening arrives to provide more light and warmth for the hours before sleep. Work slows naturally as visibility decreases. Tasks that require good light are abandoned until tomorrow. People gather close to the fire, the only source of warmth in the house, sharing that precious heat. Bodies pressed together. This is practical necessity, not affection, though affection may also be present. Every person adds their body heat to the collective warmth, and clustering close to the fire maximizes the benefit of limited fuel. Stories are told during these dark evening hours. News and gossip are shared. Work that can be done by firelight, mending clothes, repairing tools, preparing food for tomorrow, continues quietly. Silence also stretches through these hours, comfortable or uncomfortable, depending on family dynamics and individual personalities. Conversation requires energy, and energy is a limited resource. Outside, beyond the weak circle of firelight, the cold holds the land in its grip. Frost forms on every surface. Wind pushes against structures, finding every gap and crack. The world outside is hostile, dangerous, waiting. Eventually, as the fire is banked for the night, people return to their cold beds, knowing they will wake tomorrow to repeat this cycle again and again, for weeks or months more until spring finally arrives. Today, when we visit or live in northern England, winter is something we endure briefly and intermittently. We dash from heated car to heated building. We check weather forecasts on our phones and plan accordingly. We wear modern fabrics that provide remarkable warmth with minimal bulk. In 1650, winter was something that had to be survived daily, hour by hour, with no escape and no shortcuts. The same hills we see today, the same winds that blow across the landscape, the same grey skies, but with far, far less protection. The landscape itself hasn't changed much. The climate is essentially the same, but the human experience of winter in that landscape has been transformed almost beyond recognition by technology infrastructure and economic systems that provide reliable access to warmth, food, and shelter regardless of season. No one living through this winter, this normal, ordinary winter of 1650, thought of it as remarkable or historically significant. It was simply another day in an endless series of days that all looked roughly the same. Another fire to build from nearly dead embers. Another meal to stretch from diminishing stores. Another night to get through before facing another cold morning. Their thoughts were entirely practical. Staying warm enough, finding enough food, completing necessary work, protecting their families, surviving until conditions improved. They weren't thinking about future historians or how their experiences would be remembered. They were simply living, doing what needed to be done, enduring what had to be endured. If there's another place you'd like me to reconstruct, another season or time period you'd like to experience through this kind of detailed historical immersion, or another ordinary moment from the past you want to understand more deeply, let me know in the comments below. I'll continue bringing these forgotten daily experiences back into view. Thanks for being here, and thanks for stepping into the past with me.